Hello, my name is Richie Scholl from Worthington Distribution. Today I'd like to take you through a quick case study on a hospitality IP phone system installation that we were involved with a dealer in a resort in upstate New York. Here's a quick overview of the property. It's a timeshare and rental property in the southern Adirondacks in New York State. You've got amenities like a pool and some other things, 54 units. And we'll take you through the layout of the property to get an idea of what the system looked like and what it had to do. So in the main resort on the main property, there's an office, 54 guest lodges, a restaurant, a pool house, a hot tub, game room, conference center. There's no wiring between the lodges. There's some old phone wiring, but nothing to support IP wiring. And we'll get into how we handle that soon. And there is internet and Wi-Fi in each lodge, and they're all individual. So each lodge, each guest unit has its own modem and Wi-Fi router. Separate from this property is another small property with 5 rental homes, also each with their own individual modem and Wi-Fi, also no phone there previously. Some standout features of the project here and why we wanted to bring it to you and kind of see and kind of get you to think about some of the interesting things that you can do with these Grandstream phone systems is kind of what we want to go over here. So this particular system, we chose a variety of phones with the dealer and with the customer to best fit each specific application and where the phones were going to be. So in this case, 54 of the 100 phones in the system are on individual internet connections. We use the UCMRC, that's the UCM from Grandstream Remote Connect feature, part of the online suite of tools that Grandstream offers, to eliminate the need for network configuration at each, to support these endpoints through like NAT translation, through port forwarding or VPN or anything like that. Grandstream takes care of that. We never touched a local web GUI on any of the phones. This was all done through the online tools with Grandstream. They use UCM0 config to manage the local phones in the office, and then GDMS, the online, to manage the rest of the phones that are all remote. And when you put those two features together, it's 100% remote management. Nobody has to be on site to do any of this management or to do small changes in the future. So the requirements and the goals of the project overall, they were looking to replace an aging telephone system. There was a probably 20-plus-year-old Panasonic TDA system. It had some IP functionality, but all the phones were either digital or analog. And that's where some of the problems came from. The analog wires were just kind of decaying over time. They probably had some lightning strikes over time and just would no longer support the phones. So we also wanted to help reduce downtime, reduce service calls, reduce the telephone bill for certain, which did happen. But to provide 911 and local calling from each individual lodge, that really became the main focus of the phone from a guest perspective, was to provide that emergency calling should the need arise. And then to go back and unify some what were previously separate systems, like the lodge, where the guests stay, the office, the restaurant, the separate houses, to bring those things that were kind of on different systems all together into one to make it easier and more convenient for the office staff to communicate between properties and to facilitate relations with the guests from all those different facilities. They also wanted to equip key personnel and certain management folks with wireless system phones. This was using the site-wide Wi-Fi that was existing at the property already. And then give the customer an opportunity to rethink how they use the phone system. Maybe use some direct numbers, different groups, mobile phones for management personnel to talk, and then also to bring multiple companies together into one location from a phone answering standpoint. As far as the hardware that was used, this is the majority of what was there. It was the UCM 6308A. Remember, any of the phones, the systems that end in A is the audio-only series. If you don't have the A on the end, it's the same system, but it has a lot of video conferencing features, which was just not going to be necessary here. So the A series is a bit more cost effective. There were a couple of the WP835 wireless phones. These are the Wi-Fi wireless phones that are able to roam all over the site. There were 7 of the GXP2135, the smaller system phone, 9 of the 2170, which is the larger system phone. In a bit we'll go over where they were used and why there were different ones. And then 80 of the 631W, what we call the guest phones. This is a relatively new series of phone to Grandstream, and in that GHP series, that's the hospitality phone they call it, there are some smaller and really cheap options that don't have a screen at all. There's a reason that we chose the one with the customer with a screen, and we'll get into that in a few slides. A couple things more on the selection of hardware here. We are a big proponent of using the same phones as much as we can in a property, in any system I should say, even if it's a more commercial like an office system. it's really handy for the customer to have a consistent experience. What's nice about the GXP 2135 and 2170, they are different. The 70 has a larger screen and more buttons, but the user experience is exactly the same. Just like I said, a little more screen real estate, a couple more buttons. So you're able to save a little bit of money on the smaller ones in locations where you can do that. So the phone system, part of it was there for communication, but part of it's also to enhance the guest experience on site. So, and I'm back to why we chose that 631W with the large screen on that hospitality phone. We can have a screensaver on there that shows some of the amenities, some of the activities, the restaurant. It's a way to engage the guests a little bit and to let them know what is available to them on property. We could also have used voice announcements, which is kind of like a voicemail delivery. It's where staff can record one message and then send it out to all the phones. They can also make it easy for the guest to order from the restaurant, again, kind of driving sales, driving business while on site. And then, of course, make it easy to contact the front desk, contact housekeeping, those sorts of activities. Ultimately, the 631 phones were chosen because of the large screen that can show this marketing material. They are also set to allow 911 and lodge-to-lodge calls only, with the exception of a few local calls. The property really didn't want the phones to have any local or long-distance calling capabilities. They had some a few one-touch keys set up, things like call the restaurant directly, call the front desk directly, just a button press. They use the in-lodge Wi-Fi system for communication, and they connect via the internet, and they did not use the existing wiring. Like we said, there's some old telephone wiring on site. These only connect to power, so it didn't use any of the existing wiring. It was kind of left abandoned from that point. The office and the restaurant did the 2135 phones, that's the smaller phone, and the office went with a 2170, which is the larger phone. Again, just the office uses the phone more, so it made sense for them to have a more premium phone with some more real estate. In the restaurant, it was really just a necessity of communication sort of thing, where that was not necessary to have such a large phone there. A couple of options for the Wi-Fi phones. That ended up being used by the housekeeping staff, by the maintenance staff, so they can roam the property and be in contact with the front desk when they need to be. And then there was a conference phone put in place in the meeting room on property, which again is used for not just board meetings, but also available for rent for people for meetings and conferences and that sort of thing. So there's a proper conference phone put in place there. Here's a really important part, is the layout of the system, how it works, and why the Grandstream online tools became really important to really allow this system to be done relatively easily and affordably. So we have the internet at the top. When you think of the standard Grandstream phone system that you may go out there and pitch to a customer and install and configure, typically what we see is a commercial environment. So it's an office with a handful of phones, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 phones, and those phones are, when we can, we like to have them on a PoE switch right behind that Grandstream UCM system, and that lets the Grandstream manage those phones locally. We're not relying on the internet. We have a really good solid network connection, and they're very reliable. In this case, the phones come in over the internet, so we're going to have that no matter what. But from an endpoint standpoint, as far as the phones themselves are concerned, when we can, we like to have them connected right behind the UCM. So that's where you see on the office. But keep in mind, in this system, the office is 9 phones out of 100 phones, and that's all that's behind the UCM. We're physically right behind the system in this case. As we move to the right on the pictures here, down at the restaurant, there is no wiring between the office and the restaurant that would facilitate having those phones directly behind the Grandstream on a PoE switch. So they are on a PoE switch, but they connect back to the UCM over GDMS, which is the Grandstream Device Management System. We'll talk more about that in a bit and give you a demo on how exactly that works. Those phones are connected through the internet, and that's how they go back and see that Grandstream system. Moving to the right a little further, in each individual lodge, again, there are 54 lodges. 12 of them have 2 different, like an A and a B side, so there's actually 2 phones in those. And there we have existing in each lodge a modem and a Wi-Fi router. In that case, the 631 phone is used over Wi-Fi to that Wi-Fi router in the lodge, and then over internet up to Grandstream from there. And then finally, the staff wireless phones really kind of work very much the same as the lodge phones. The difference is the staff wireless phones are paired to the site-wide staff network, and that lets them roam around, not just be paired to one unit. I think the main point that we're trying to drive home here is of 100 phones, only 9 of them are connected directly to the system. The rest go through the internet. Another really important thing here And this is kind of a quick plug for a company called Voxtelesys. We are not in any way aligned with Voxtelesys, other than that we've been a really big fan of their service, and our customers have been too. We actually use them here in our own office on our Grandstream phone system. But we've had a number of installers that use Voxtelesys as their provider of voice over IP phone lines. So now that gets you away from your traditional copper lines, away from even the cable company gateway where you have phone lines that come out over an RJ11 jack from a cable gateway, and we're 100% purely IP phone lines. Why is that advantageous? Well, a couple reasons. Pricing is the big one, and we'll talk about that in a second. But another big one is it's really, really easily manageable inside the Grandstream UCM. Essentially, you've got a number of talk paths that you have. It's how many concurrent calls you want to let that system support. And then you get some phone numbers, and you basically say, where does each phone number ring during what time of the day? What extension is allowed to dial out as what number, what line does it present when it dials out, and you just go from there. It's a really easy way to put it all together. The call quality is fantastic. There is an option for failover, so when you set up these, they're called IP trunks, when you set them up with Voxtelesys, the carrier, you're able to define a phone number, maybe it's a cell phone or a landline that was left there for backup purposes, where if for some reason the internet fails, whether that's a failure of the internet service at your site where your system is installed, or somewhere between you and Voxtelesys, if you're on a call, that call would then drop, but the next call that you have coming in would then route to that backup number. It would ring on that cell phone or whatever you put in there. So really robust. I have to say though, in the 4 years that we've used Voxtelesys in our own office, we've had, I think, about 30 seconds worth of outage that was on the Voxtelesys side. From a pricing standpoint, and again, this is the really big thing, and when you look at customer applications and start to look at what they're paying for their phone bill right now versus what it could be with a solution like Voxtelesys, a lot of times that drives the sale of the Grandstream system because the payback period is so quick just because of the monthly savings. When you add that up and look at maybe 2 or 3 years of savings, a lot of times that pays for the system right there. It's pretty impressive. So really quickly, what we have here is $1 per month. All of these numbers here are per month. $1 per talk channel. Again, talk channel is how many lines we want to support. It's a minimum of 4 when you go with the pay-per-use plan like this is. So you have to take a minimum of 4 talk channels. Maybe you have 8 or a dozen, however many you need. $2 per local incoming number, $3 per 800 number, toll-free incoming number, and then that just gets you those lines. It's however many you want. So real quick thing on that, you might have 10 talk channels, support 10 concurrent calls. But you might have 15 or 20 numbers. Maybe you've got a handful of direct numbers to key staff that have their own direct number. Maybe you have some 800 numbers. Maybe you have a customer who operates a couple of different business names out of one office, so they need to be different numbers associated with each business. So it's absolutely likely, and it happens very often, where you have more numbers than you have talk channels. Just because you have all those numbers doesn't mean they're all in use at the same time. So again, reducing the amount of talk channels you have will reduce your monthly bill because you're not paying for capacity that you would never use anyway. Then we go to $2 per month for E911. Real quick thing on E911, suffice it to say, when you move to purely IP phone lines, you need to tell the IP carrier physically with an address where those lines are located, because that's what's going to be transmitted to the local emergency center when an emergency call, like a 911 call, is placed, and that's how they know where to send first responders. So it's super important that that's set up properly. That just gets tied to one of your local numbers, and that costs $2 a month. You're 1 cent per minute for your outbound and local inbound, and you are 2.5 cents per minute for your incoming 800. In most cases, the entire phone bill fits on one page, so accounting departments love that. Really easy to understand. We're just a really big fan of this service overall. It's used on this site. We've had a number of integrators use it on different customer sites that they've done. We really like it, and everybody's been super happy with it. Back on the guest phone really quick, this is really what we call this always-on passive marketing. And in this particular installation for this customer, I think it was a really big part of the reason that they went with it. They kind of came back and said, okay, we know we need to replace this old aging phone system. We know guests are not making phone calls all the time from their lodge, but we do need to give them a way to contact 911. We want them to be able to contact our restaurant, our front desk, obviously, but how do we get more out of it? Well, with these phones, these are actually less expensive than your typical office phone, even a smaller version of an office phone. So they make sense. They're the right phone for this application. They don't have all the extra, one-touch buttons with LEDs. They're really straightforward. But they give you this large display that you can do a lot with. So in this case, we've got a home screen called a wallpaper that we can now put a custom image on. Again, just kind of enhances that experience. It makes it look like it belongs there and wasn't just stuck there because they needed a phone. And that is kind of a always on, just a nicer image that's on the background. Where it gets really cool is this photo on the right, and you may see it passing by on our phone here right now, is a screensaver option. So after 3 minutes of inactivity, so if the phone's not touched for 3 minutes, it bounces into screensaver, and then staff on property have the ability to create these JPEG images. You show them where they get stored, and then the phone every 30 seconds will switch through to a new image. In this case, what the property ended up doing is using it to say, here are some of our specials at the restaurant this week, here's some meals you can expect to find at the restaurant, here's some of the amenities on site that you can use, go to the beach, borrow a canoe or a kayak, go to the store and pick up some essentials. All the things that are on property are scrolling through here, and it's just kind of an always-on marketing tool that's passive but kind of gets your attention when you walk into the guest lodges because they're changing and they sort of get your attention. That screensaver's come on, like I said, after 3 minutes. It's really the primary use of the screen. It becomes, even though it's a phone, this becomes kind of a marketing tool. It fetches the images from a specified internet location, or to make it even easier now, right through the Grandstream online service. They can just fetch the images from there. You can store them there. And the web or marketing or social media team on the property just uploads them and the phone grabs them. We say they can be long-term or short-term messages. What we mean about that is, for the most part, you'll find customers would create these images, and they are things that might last a whole season or maybe for a year of operation, so they just kind of scroll through and there are things that are happening all the time. There is an option where you might want property to be able to change things as a quick announcement to customers. Maybe if the pool is not working or the heater in the spa is down or whatever the case is, you want to let guests to know. If you change that image on GDMS, you post it up there on the web portal, within 30 seconds, the phone system the phones see the change, and it will grab that new image. So you can do really short-term, quick things with the phones. Quickly, kind of how the customer went through this and deployed the system. They configured the UCM, the Grandstream 6308A. They configured that with known information. Things like what were the extension numbers, what was the name of each extension, what people or what departments have different groups, the incoming voice menus, how they're going to work, what happened when you press each button in the menu, incoming routes and outgoing routes. That means what phones are allowed to dial out to what numbers, who could dial internationally, who could dial nationally, where each individual incoming number rang. Did it ring to a group of phones, one specific phone? Was it a group of phone, and if they couldn't answer it, then we overflowed to a different group of people? All those things that the customer knew from the property, they were then able to kind of configure on the phone. Next thing was to configure all the office phones using zero config. For any of you folks out there that have done a Grandstream system before, pretty good chance you've used zero config to set up the phones that are right behind the phone system. Again, those local phones that are on the PoE switch connected to the UCM. In that case, the phone system finds them. You basically say, yeah, this phone is this extension. You might go in and set up some templates so that they all act the same way, or to push the button config out to them. It's a real convenient way to do it. So that was done first. Then all of the remote phones, meaning all the ones that are out there and connecting over the internet, so the lodges, the amenity areas, the restaurant, they all got added through GDMS. That's Grandstream's cloud management system. To do that, there's a barcode on the back of each phone. You grab the app either for Android or for an Apple phone, and you just scan that in and give it a name like Lodge 1, Lodge 5, Pool Phone, whatever the case is, and that now puts that phone in the account, so it's now in there. Later you go in and tie an extension to that phone. That's how it becomes an active working phone. So you do that, created some model templates, and again, that way you're not configuring each individual phone. So for the about 70 phones at just the lodge location alone, they're, aside from their extension number, they're configured the exact same way. They've got one button that calls the front desk, one button that calls the restaurant, they have a custom background image, and they've got a custom screensaver that they go through, and there's really nothing different. So all those settings are put in the model template, and then every time a new phone is added to that group, it just grabs that template information and it acts the way you expect it to. To that same point, if something changes, like you want to change the background image, or you've decided you want to add another button, maybe besides this front desk and restaurant, you're going to add a store button or a housekeeping button or a maintenance button, you can do that in one place, and it pushes out to all 70 of those phones at one time. Next step was to install the office phones and select guest phones. One thing we're a really big fan of when it comes to deploying these phones is doing some testing before you do a complete rollout. You have to realize when you're doing this, you're going to completely upend that office. You're ripping out the phone system that was there for maybe 20 years that they're familiar with, and you're putting a new one in. A crawl, walk, run approach is definitely best, and it lets you smooth out some things that maybe they don't like or that they need to get used to before you just throw it in there and 100% flip over to it. So in this case, the phones that were already on the desk stayed. They got their Grandstream phone next to it. A handful of the guest lodges got the guest phones, and that was enough to do some testing. When you get these IP phone lines, you get a temporary number that you can do testing with, so you're able to do that. You tell the office, please use the new phones for your outgoing calls for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. How do you like it? Can you transfer calls? Do you get the calls you expect to get? Is the call quality good? All those sort of things that you would like to know before you're 100% live. So once you get that all nailed down and you like it, you go ahead and deploy the rest of the phones to all the lodges, make sure all the office phones are in, and then we start to port the phone numbers over. Port is the term we use to say, let's pull the phone number from the old carrier that was billing us before and bring it into our new carrier, Vox Telesys at this point. Bring those phone numbers over one at a time, test them. Once they're all brought over, before you know it, you're just kind of automatically on your new Grandstream system, and you can get rid of those old phones and move on. So in a quick summary here, we were replacing an old phone system that had poor uptime, providing some benefits to staff, and providing cost reduction over time because the phone bill was reduced so much. In this case, for the amount of lines and numbers that this customer had, I think the old phone bill was somewhere north of like $1,200 a month. It went to right around $200 a month with this. So $1,000 a month savings will buy you a phone system pretty quickly. So that's kind of what happened here. So stick with us for a minute, and we're going to hop over into the GDMS and give you a live demo of how the management works and how we use the UCM for the local phones and the GDMS for the remote phones and bring that together into a seamless system. Okay, we're in the Grandstream GDMS website now. This is the portal where you manage your systems. So one installer can have multiple organizations, multiple sites in here. You have multiple sites per organization. That's kind of how you break down the system. So in this case, we're looking at the system. The first thing I would look at here is that in the sites, we have a couple of different ones. These are the different locations within this site. What this lets us do is make some templates that just apply to one site. And then when we add phones to that site, they automatically get that template and act like they should with those settings for that particular site. On the overview, you can see what devices are online, what devices are not, what you might have to take a look at. But the important couple of things here are, if we go to UCMRC, that's the UCM remote connect. That means we're connected to the PBX on site, but through the cloud. We go to the on-premise PBX, and you'll see one come up. And then this button is where you go in, and it essentially creates a tunnel to that system through the Grandstream system, so we don't have to do any specific networking or port forwarding or anything like that. So that'll come up here. So at this point, we are looking at the web configuration interface of the UCM 6308A, just as if we were connected to the same network as that UCM. We're just doing it through the Grandstream cloud system, the GDMS system. So here, we've got the entire dashboard that we would normally have. Gives us all the information about the system. We can see there's some calls online right now. But the really important thing that I want to kind of draw your attention to for the purpose of our case study here is just the way we're connecting phones two different ways. So this system is physically in the office with, I believe there are 9 phones in the office connected to this system. So we could have managed those 9 phones through the cloud system, through GDMS, like we did all the other phones. But the reason that the integrator, and we kind of talked through it with them, sort of decided to go this way is that if there were ever an issue with GDMS, this is 100% a locally configured, locally maintained system, and it will continue to operate on its own. So you may lose other things if that were to happen, which we've never seen that happen, but just for kind of making this as robust as we can, this is the way we went. So if we go into device management, zero config, if you've done Grandstream systems before, this is probably the way you've configured them. So here you go, you can see your phones, and there's actually 7 phones. These are the phones that are online. This line here, number 2, it's picking up a guest phone, which actually is managed by GDMS, but it picks it up here because it sees it on the local network, but it's not managing it. So we see the phones here. We can go to model templates like we always do in zero config. We can edit a template to say what buttons are on the phones, what background is on the phone, all that sort of stuff. And that all sort of happens right here in the model templates. So we have screensaver setting in, some firmware upgrade settings, and then as we get down, you would see all of the configurations for the multi-purpose buttons. So this is pretty standard stuff, not much more to see here in terms of how that's done. But let's jump back over into GDMS, and if we come down a little further, we have VoIP device. The VoIP device is like the phone, the endpoint, that's what it's called in this interface. So here we can go to any specific site. So in this case, we'll go to the lodges. And here are all the phones that are connected to it. We can see what's online. If one's offline, maybe the people have it unplugged at the moment. We can see all the phones that are online. And you can go into settings here, and we can modify all the settings on the phone right from the interface right here within GDMS. The way these phones got in here was we used the Grandstream GDMS app on Android or iOS, scanned in the barcode on there, and that brought it into what you're seeing now on your screen. Once it's on there, like I said, here we can configure it. And then if we then go up to our extensions, this will bring in all the extensions that you already created on the UCM. They're here, so we can basically pick one, and if we go to edit it, this is where we get down to the bottom, and you would assign this extension to a phone. So you're basically going to find a phone. So we can go into one, and you would see a phone there, give it an account. And if we slide all the way over, the really important thing is make sure you pick the correct SIP server here, this one with the GDMS in the name. That's how you get in and tell it to use GDMS and not connect directly to the system over a local network. So we have that. So again, we've got the phones in, we brought them in using the app. We already had a list of extensions, which it grabbed from the phone, and we're just associating extension to phone, and that's what makes that pairing. The last thing I want to talk about quickly in here and how some of the files are done, the file server within GDMS, and how that applies to the background and the screensaver. If we go into the system and then resources on GDMS, firmwares are stored here. They do that for you. If you go to other resources, this is where we can load files into GDMS that are then available in other places. The screensaver is done in a couple different ways. There's actually a text file that you create and give it all the JPEG images that it should pull in. So that would be one like this one here on the top. And then the other are actually pictures, and that can either be a wallpaper or one of the slides, so to speak, on the screensaver. What we see here is there's going to be a level of participation in this part of the system that the end customer is going to have to do, right? Because I think as the installer, as the integrator, you're probably not creating these images. You're not going in there from time to time to refresh the images. That's kind of on the end user. It's on the property in this case. So what the integrator did was find out from them, okay, do you want a screensaver? Yeah, we do. How many slides do you want in there? We're good with 5. Okay. So the integrator just kind of pops in that text file and then a spot for 5 images, get them from the customer and put them in there. And then all the customer has to ever do is overwrite those 5 images with new images, and they will automatically get pushed to the phone as you see them on the display. And then they'll just come up and they'll pop through. So the kind of working together part here with the customer is getting it set up and then letting them take it from there. So that's sort of the end part of that. Obviously, much more to talk about within GDMS, within Grandstream. This is not meant to be really a training, but more just a kind of an overview or a kind of a look at a really neat application. So again, we normally see these kind of entry-level, so many extensions in more of a commercial environment. This was a really neat one because it was kind of outside the norm. Pretty big system, pretty different application in terms of the way all the different phones connect to the system, but one that Grandstream handles really, really well, and the flexibility they give us made it really pretty easy. So this is kind of meant to give you an overview of how that works. Any questions, give us a call, drop us an email. We'd be happy to kind of walk through your application with you. And there are many others that we're not talking about that this would also be a really good fit for, from small entry-level systems, commercial, residential, now hospitality. It's all in there. So any questions, please feel free to give us a shout, and we'll help you on your application. Thanks.